Hi, everybody. We'll get started in just a moment here. Give any stragglers just another minute to join. Okay, we'll get started here. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Pat Donaghy. I'm the creative director here at Cavelo. I wanted to say thank you for joining us. This is our very first Cavelo Connect community live stream. We see a couple folks here from Cavelo, which is great. And excuse me if I'm not saying your name right, Indrajit. Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited not only for today's stream, but for the launch of Cavelo Connect, our community that's built for our customers. As Cavelo continues to evolve, we are finding that it is more important than ever to have a dedicated place for us to connect with our customers and build relationships and provide as much value as we can for you to be successful. So we're thrilled that you're here. We love that we have a place for you to do that. And we want to be able to engage and interact with you and have a place where you can engage and interact with your peers as well. So ultimately, we're all here to thrive and hopefully help you find success in your business. Off the top, just some quick housekeeping notes before we begin. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand to share or watch at a later date. If you have any questions for our co-hosts here, Phil or James, there's a Q&A feature in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can leave questions there, and we'll get to them towards the end of the stream. If you are joining us as a guest and you're not part of the Cavelo Connect community, you won't have access to the chat or the Q&A, but if you have a question, please don't hesitate to reach out at the end of the stream. There'll be some contact information there where you can get a hold of us. So with that said, I'm going to hand things over to Phil Guerin. He's our technical account manager here at Cavelo and a Cavelo product expert. And he's going to walk you through some of the great new features we've added to Cavelo in Q3. Over to you, Phil.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate that. Hello to everybody on the chat and on the stream. It's my first time on the platform, so let me see if I can make sure I can share this effectively. And Pat, you're awesome. This thing works too easy. Okay, excellent. And I'll just look for somebody on video there. Just give me a nod that my screen share is coming through okay, so I don't jump the gun too fast. You look good to go. Okay, cool. So I'm going to walk you through just more of a modern update in terms of where Cavelo is today. So this is a pretty fun moment for me. I remember sitting in a room with James once upon a time where what the solution was at that point was scanning a couple files for a few credit card numbers. And we have taken some pretty great strides since then. I'm going to start on this page here where everything is aggregated up into a center point for an impact risk analysis. And I'm using that word impact specifically. A traditional risk assessment, think about looking for all the weak points to a network, all the weak points to an asset. But now what happens after somebody compromises those assets or compromises those networks? What's the impact involved in doing so? So what this represents is the internal side of any organization, and I'm going to come back to that. We can also represent the cloud-hosted side of any organization. And what I'm going to start on here is the public-facing side of all organizations, right? We're doing what the table stakes are, what we used to be doing across all the rest of those conversations, right? If it's a public-facing server, let's scan it for vulnerabilities. If that server has exposed web applications running on them, let's scan those web applications for vulnerabilities, right? That's all the justification you need, arguably, to go close the gaps on public-facing systems, and we help you do that on a continuous basis. The problem is that's typically the focus applied to the cloud sources and all the internal assets, and frankly, we can do a lot better. On the cloud-hosted side, we hear every week a bit of a fallacy, right? Well, my data is secure now because I've moved it from on-prem into the cloud. So my work is done, right? It's not. You're just not scanning the server for vulnerabilities anymore. But how well configured those tenants are matters for the risk qualification. The user permissioning in the tenant. If everything is wide open to everybody at all times, that's a distinct measurement on the risk qualification. Most importantly, the data in the tenants. Kind of the most important thing, where if I have 3 to 5 different cloud services, some of them are storing operational logs, others are storing vacation pictures, and others are storing my intellectual property and my user data and my employment data. The data is the thing that's qualifying risk the most. And then to take that on the internal side of the organization, again, we don't want people to focus on the internal, on the easiest assets to compromise. We want people to focus on the biggest impacts when a compromise happens. And so you'll see here, we're qualifying risk in what I call a novel way here, using not only vulnerability information, not only configuration information. We look at the user permissioning and the data on all these various systems. So if someone clicks on a link, what's the riskier click? If an asset walks away, lost or stolen, what's the riskier event, right? If 5 different systems get crypto locked, what's the impact to the business, not just the likelihood of that happening in the first place? So the way that we do it, we offer all the mechanisms for a traditional risk assessment that you're going to want to do. We scan for vulnerabilities from the external perspective, so public-facing vulnerabilities, public-facing web applications. We can scan them for CVE vulnerabilities. We can scan those web applications, looking for things like SQL injections, bad header management, and things like that. We can do an internal subnet-based crawl, looking for vulnerabilities, credentialed or non-credentialed. And our endpoint agent that deploys to anything running Windows, Linux, or Mac will do an on-host vulnerability assessment, which means you're now scanning everything for vulnerabilities, regardless of what network they're on, regardless of if they're working at home or on the road somewhere, and no one's connected to a VPN in order to get this done. On top of the web application vulnerabilities and the internal, external, and host-based vulnerabilities, we're also able to offer configuration hardening scans. These are all the level 1 controls from the CIS benchmarks. Think of things like password complexity rules, account lockout rules, MFA settings. How well hardened are not only the devices in the environment, but also leading cloud services like Office 365, right? Remember, I can't scan M365 for vulnerabilities, but as an administrator, I can do my job well or I can do it poorly. Now think about this as one step shy of running a weekly automated penetration test. Right? We're not going to sit down and compromise a vulnerability, plant a flag on a system, and write you a fluffy novel on how we did it. I'll argue we do considerably more by showing you all the risk to your cloud services, public-facing systems, networks, and all your assets. We'll show you the likelihood of those vulnerabilities being breached within the next 30 days. We'll give you the CVSS scores because you need that to check some boxes. But more importantly, what lives behind the vulnerabilities? This is where the data matters, right? I also can't just patch my way out of a data exfiltration. Someone clicking on a link is a whole different can of worms than somebody trying to compromise me at the edge and working their way internally. It's a lot easier to phish somebody in your organization, right? So at that point, I have to look at the data. And I have to lean into the reality that the design of where my data is supposed to be is almost never going to be one-to-one with the reality of where the data lives, right? So simply calling out the data that's supposed to be in your SharePoint sites and supposed to be on your internal file shares, people have copies of that locally. People are downloading it on their laptops and desktops. People are sending copies to their colleagues or even people outside of the organization. 90% of the time, it's not malicious, which makes it very hard to track because no one's trying to commit problems. Most organizations have a hard time running permissions management, right? So once you understand where all of the data is, you understand that there's going to be a continual divergence between the design and the reality. Who has access to that data becomes just as important to where that data lives. We'll pull the full permissions model from SharePoint and other cloud sources. We'll pull the full permissions model from on-prem Active Directory. So if it's in the cloud, if it's on-prem or a hybrid management of the both, we'll give you the full permissions model. Who has access to what and what could they be doing with it? And you can turn on the access audit to get insights into the working model. Who's sharing files out of the organization? Who's creating data? Who's deleting data? Who's making edits to data? Is this within my control policies? Is this outside of my control policies? I'll get to that in a moment. As a classification engine, Cavelo is head and shoulders above our peers and our competition when it comes to the accuracy results that we provide. I'm going to give you an example of why that's the case, but as important, because we're so highly accurate, it affords us the ability to integrate with IBM's cost of a breach research. So now we're not only showing you where the data is, where it's supposed to be, where copies of that are littered across the environment, what's the liability impact to that scenario using real world leading research derived from real world data breaches, looking at the actual data involved in the breach. We take our best in class accuracy results, we apply the weights from leading research, and now you have a liability lens on top of the best data classification results that you're going to find. As you work to keep the data where it's supposed to be, as you work to keep the wrong types of data outside of the environment, as you work to make sure that only the right people have access to it and only the right people are using it in the ways that you're supposed to be using it, we should probably be aligning our patching strategies and our protection strategies to the data realities, right? If I can tell you that there's nothing on 80% of your environment to give you concern, if that same 80% of your environment doesn't present risks from network topology breaches and pivots and things like that, this is an excellent opportunity to start accepting risk. If I can keep the data where it's supposed to be, I know when it's moving where it's not supposed to be, and I have the simple processes to reconcile that back. If I know when way too many people have access to it, and I have processes to reconcile that back, I can spend more time in less amount of the environment, and I can be as protected or more protected by focusing on patching the things that actually matters. So basically, let's move away from indiscriminately chasing CVSS scores. Let's look at the probabilities of a breach and what the impact of that breach is going to look like. And let's focus on the things that matter the most. I'm just keeping my eye on the Q&A and the chat. I'm not seeing anything in here, so I'm just going to keep going. Cavelo as a platform is a platform. We're represented as an attack surface management solution. There's lots of solutions out there that brand themselves an attack surface management solution, right? Running config scans is not attack surface. Running a vulnerability scan is not an attack surface. Collecting logs out of the environments is not an attack surface. Anything that gives you access to compromise the system and get your hands on the data, that's a part of your attack surface. And one of the big important parts of that is understanding that you're well deployed. This is a nice new aspect of the platform where all of our agent deployments, you can turn them into subnet beacons looking for other things on the network. All these green hosts are where Cavelo is successfully installed. All of these black hosts, these are network peripherals living across these subnets, right? I want to make sure that I'm scanning these subnets for vulnerabilities. If I'm not, that's a call to action. These pesky little red hosts, we have discovered assets in the environment that should have Cavelo installed but don't. We're missing part of our surface. Maybe our RMM doesn't know about them. Maybe these machines weren't online when we pushed out the agent. Doesn't matter. We need to fill the gap so we're getting the insights that we need. Once the deployment gap is filled, our recommendations engine that we've released with our new composite scoring system will actually tell you what to do in the smallest amount of steps to most reduce the risk score on the most impactful assets in the organization. You don't have to patch every single vulnerability to move the needle. You have to patch the ones that matter. You don't have to throw every single configuration rule at a system. You have to do the things that matter. And if you're not running all the scans that you could be running, you're not getting the best insights that you can be on this impact analysis. So we'll even help you understand that as well. Now I'm always focused on maximizing my ROI by protecting the things that matter. I now have an ability to accept a considerable amount of risk that I used to not be able to accept. Like, I'm not going to not go patch those 9s and 10s on systems that are black boxes to me and I don't know what's inside them, because that's what I'm supposed to do and that's how I'm measured as a professional. If I can show you that there's nothing in there worth protecting, we can start having better conversations. Another thing that we just recently released that's really resonating in our partner communities, think of this as a subset of the entitlement review process, but focused on things that are really hard to manage, like Copilot. We make this simple for people to understand. How are human beings in the environment sharing data that give Copilot access to the content? What has Copilot actually crawled, read, and ingested? So what content is now available to the Copilot prompts? And I'll come back to that. As well, how well configured is your M365 tenant as it relates to Copilot? Am I well configured? Do I understand what this thing is reading? And do I understand how the human beings are making this a difficult problem for me? Because anyone who shares out a link where anyone has the link and read the file, Copilot can read the file. The example I use with a lot of our customers is, think about insider privacy risk. With Copilot, you're not supposed to have to worry about organization to organization drift, right? You're given a guarantee that all of that data is being learned upon within a walled garden. So let Copilot read it, right? No. Every organization goes through a comp review or a compensation review every year. It's going to get written down. It needs to be discussed by multiple people. That file is going to be shared. And if I'm aware that Copilot is now active in the environment, I never have to look at the file. I never have to get the link. I never have to look at the document. I just have to ask Copilot once a week, give me the payroll information for the company. If Copilot reads it, I found a massive violation in insider privacy risk. And again, all you have to do is manage entitlement reviews and manage permissions and manage sharing effectively. And you can considerably mitigate not only AI's access to your data, but the human being's access to your data. Something else that comes up a lot within this is, Cavelo is a DLP solution. Close. I qualify this as a DLP solution running in monitoring or learning mode. We don't do the blocking and tackling, but we considerably increase the efficacy of any active DLP deployment by able to actually help measure the efficacy of the actions taken in the active DLP side. So if I'm concerned about certain actions happening within the environment, I don't want to use a huge hammer and go put in a bunch of disruption and stop a bunch of people from doing things. I want to understand, is that a small problem? Is that a big problem? Is this happening once a quarter or 27 times a day? Right? Where should data not be? What kind of data should not be sent out in emails? What kind of records access do I want to put fine grained access to? Let's have a solution that's measuring the entire environment, look for control violations, measure them, track them. Now I understand, is this something that I can train my way out of? Or is this problem so big and so systemic across the organization that I have to look for some kind of blocking and tackling, even if it's disruptive, right? Because we now have the data that too many people are making too many mistakes with the data itself. We're not able to keep on top of patching every single week, and we're not able to keep on top of the data drift. So I'm going to have to take a look at these policy violations seriously. And now I have the justification, right? Like, guys, we're falling back on this. I need some kind of blocking and tackling, and here's the data to justify it. If you put the cart before the horse and you put out the blocking and tackling first, the problem comes in. How do you know it's seeing the things that it's supposed to be seeing? And how do you know it's stopping what it's stopping? Those reports are just going to show you what it saw and what it did. You're going to miss the missed opportunities of the superset measurements, and that's where Cavelo comes in. So that way we're automating out all these reports. All these notifications can do a direct PSA integration with your ticketing systems of choice. And we'll automate out high-level risk reports. We'll automate out ongoing operational detailed reports of where all your data sensitivity is, where it's all at risk of a breach because of the litany of vulnerabilities that we're trying to manage in the environment, right? What are the most impactful assets in the environment? Over time, wouldn't it be nice to move away from talking about how many tickets I closed with my client every month and every quarter, and let's start talking about the impact of closing those tickets? How has the work that we've done with you had an impact on the data liability in the environment? How has the work that we've been doing with you affected the risk of exposure to that data liability? Right? And if you need to run things like endpoint vulnerability audits, network vulnerability audits, we have a very auditor-friendly set of reports to go with that as well. What are we scanning? What's passing? What's failing? What are the buckets of interest, et cetera? And again, all of these reports are automatable. You can run them ad hoc. You can add your own branding to most of these. It's quite a nice solution to be able to know that you're deployed to everything. You have automatic notifications for insights on what you need. You understand all the data across your environment. You understand who has access to that data, who's working with that data. You have an overview of the liability in the environments and where it lives, and use all of that to best protect the assets, best protect the data, best protect the environments. Because again, any environment, we're never at zero vulnerabilities, and there's a story as to why. And if we're looking at all these streams of data, we now have a solid story to tell in terms of why we are focusing on the vulnerabilities we are and why we're accepting risk on the ones that we're not. So I'll leave this conversation on focus on the impact of a breach in order to know where you're protecting and why you're protecting, and use the data and use very high quality results around the data in order to drive that conversation. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to pass the baton over to James, unless there's any other questions that come up through this. And there's some even more interesting stuff to come over 2025.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Pat. I wanted to highlight a couple of things. One thing Phil mentioned in regard to accuracy, it's worthwhile mentioning when we build products, we truly believe that you have to build a great product. And never will I suggest the product is 100% there, but that's our goal. And how we do that is we make sure that we benchmark our product to enterprise grade tools. And so that's exactly what we've done with Cavelo's platform. So when it comes to who we replace on the enterprise side, and we've done POCs against them, it would be the Qualyses, the Tenables, the Varonis's, and the Landsweepers in the world. And so our model is, what we want to do is continually consolidate our customers' tech stack, make it easy to use these different modules in a really easy fashion so that you can deliver that to your customers. We will continually add those modules and functionalities. So think of it, like the product will never just stay the same. It's always going to evolve. And so my model on how we do that is we actually carve out 30% of our roadmap for customer feedback. And so what we're trying to do with this community is make sure that we communicate to our customer base so that they can communicate back to us. We feel like you guys are in the trenches. You guys have a say in how we build a product. And so that's a really important statement that I wanted to make. I also carve off Friday mornings for customer feedback meetings where I sit and I talk to them. I think that's really important because I want to understand how our customers are using the product. I tell everyone, don't give us the golf clap. Give us constructive criticism. And that's how you build a great product. And so just talking a little bit about 2025 at a high level, and there'll be more to come, but I wanted to leave on a couple notes on 2025. Our focus is going to be adding other integration into PSA platforms, Halo One, and different RMM tools as well. Really understanding the workflow that we need to be part of in order to streamline our product with other products that are out there. And then we talked a little bit about configuration hardening and CIS benchmark. Where we're going to take this is twofold. We're going to overlay more compliance acts, like for example CMMC, and so it's very much like the example Phil had brought up around co-pilot readiness. We're going to do that for different compliance acts, pull in the actual recommended configuration and recommendations from the regulatory compliance perspective to really help our customers, help their customers on the compliance side. And at the same time, sitting and talking to our customers, quite frankly, what they want is they want more automation from us. So where that comes into play is around the workflow into PSA and RMM tools, but also we are going to do remediation when it comes to hardening in Office 365. Plus, we're going to be compatible with Google as well, and so that will be, I'm not trying to suggest it will be just an easy button, but it will be allow the workflow to be streamlined so that our customers can focus more on the high touch stuff rather than kind of all the clicks that is tedious. And then the other big component, again, listening to our customers. We understand that the value that our partners bring to the table is that they talk to their customers, and they need the flexibility in the dashboard and in the reports because there's different use cases out there. And so we heard that loud and clear, and that's something that's in our roadmap for next year is a way that you can customize your dashboard and reporting. We are going to deliver this as a service where we're going to do it on our customers' behalf. It'll be our support team. But from a product perspective, we're going to build that capability and that engine so that we can do it timely for our customers and make sure that we meet the expectations from that perspective. Those are the high level kind of the big pieces that we're working on. The only other thing that is very important for us is ease of use. And this is something that it's continuous in our roadmap and something that, again, we want to get more feedback on. We want to make this product as easy to use as possible. That being said, we don't know what we don't know. So this is where that feedback loop comes into play.
It's okay, Pat. There was a question in the chat from Indy. I'll just touch on that really quickly. So I'll just read it out for the benefit of those. He's asking if there's any documents. Oh, awesome, Pat, you're on top of this. Any artifacts or documentation around tech stack consolidation. So I've seen this internally. We're working on this right now. Expect to see that kind of information coming out through the Cavelo community. Reach out in the meantime and ask some questions. I'd be happy to have a conversation about it. But you can absolutely expect to see things like tech stack consolidation coming through on the community here.
Thanks, Phil. That's incredible stuff, guys. Thank you both for sharing all your insights with us today. I think that's it for our very first community live stream. And I think I speak for everybody here at Cavelo when we say we are very excited to move into 2025. So please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. Like Phil said, there's contact information here for both James and Phil. You can also connect with us through the community or visit cavelo.com. And we'll be back in 2025 with some more feature updates and some exciting community events. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.